Hey, Zern listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. Would you have rather me said yes today? Knowing what you just said about me being too much, would you rather me got on that altar and say yes to your daughter? There's no way that makes any sense. I'm sorry.
Well, you know what? You knew you were going to say no to this. Why did you let her go all this? Or make
I
her
didn't know.
Yeah, it's notable that Nancy is starting to have the 1,000-mile stare because I'm guessing she's used to being ignored is the way it looks to me. In the family, she might have been the ignored one, the quiet one, the silently observing one or something. I don't know. I could be reading into it, but the mom is going after Bartise. It's a good impulse, but it's not invited, and it's been clearly rejected twice. And so the mom doing this is interesting, but she's having a moment. So, but then he started to engage with her, which at first I was like thinking it was great that Bartise just wasn't really engaging with the mom. Just like, look, it's between Nancy and her mom, and I'll just stay out of it. But then the mom says to Nancy, essentially, Bartise is below you. That's not really what she was saying, but you could see how Bartise would kind of feel it that way. And so he starts to defend himself to the mom, which I don't think is a good idea, because what's the mom going to say? Well, what the mom said was, okay, fine. Then why didn't you tell her earlier? Why did you drag her, onto the altar? And I think it's because the show forces them to wait until they're at the altar. So the mom might not be familiar with reality TV, which wouldn't surprise me. So I think I don't know if that's what happened, but I think that's what happened.
It's not ready for who you are. Do you hear me? It's not ready for who you are. Because you're too much for him. If he says no right now, that means because he's not prepared to receive you.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. Would you have
The other thing I'll throw out there is there are different ideas within different families about how one expresses care to each other. And their family might be of the sort that you have to do something. You can't do nothing, And if that means getting a little messy with your expressions, then that's what it means. Whereas other people in other families will consider this to not be very helpful. And there can even be pockets within a family of different ideas of how you're supposed to react to this. So the mom could be of a belief system within a group of people, maybe her family, maybe her extended family, her community, I don't know, where unless she does something, then she's not being a good parent. And I've seen that before, where parents feel that way. And when they react this way, it's received as such. They're just like, if she didn't react this way, then it means the mom doesn't really care. So I don't know if that's what's happening, but the way she's coming across, it seems like the mom is actually having a bit of a moment. Her voice, her face, it seems like some trauma is being touched in her. I can't tell, but that's the way it looks to me.
rather me said yes today? Knowing what you just said about me being too much, would you rather me got on that altar and say yes to your daughter? There's no way that makes any sense. I'm sorry.
Well, you know what? You knew you were going to say no to this. Why did you let her go all this? Or make
I
her
didn't know I was
believe
going to say no.
on
I
all
had
this
no
and
clue I was
that?
going to say no. We're here. We had our journey, and that journey can continue after today.
That's fine.
I'm going to throw out another possible factor, hypothesis, is that the family has experienced racism in a lot of ways over the generations, in a lot of really horrific incidents that they've experienced, to feel lesser, to feel unacceptable, rejectable, and that the mom could also be fighting that fight as well, that she feels like, once again, our people are not good enough for mainstream America or something like that. Now, of course, Bartise is a person of color, so it's not like that's lost on the mom. But you could see a scenario where the mom considers Bartise to be more central to mainstream American culture, privileged American culture, than her daughter. I don't know that. It could be opposite. Identity and privilege is complicated and sometimes quite unique to individuals given their social location. But, we could see the mom having that be a factor. There's no indication of that directly, obviously, but, you never know.
Got there.
Yeah.
We're here.
It's okay, son.
No,
It's okay.
I'm just here. I'm just listening. I'm listening to what he got to say.
I don't have
They need
anything.
to have
I
their
said it.
time together,
Yeah.
okay? I don't think we need to be here. I think they need to have their time together.
You brought us here for a reason.
No, he did
No.
not.
Nancy's just like, my God, can I just have a conversation? And just as Nancy was about to express herself and talk, too, she's just getting shut down left and right. The mom comes over again. The brother comes over. A different family member comes over. His mom comes over. Now everyone's coming over. It's like,
Now we all gonna listen for a reason. You brought me here for a reason, so I'm listening for you. You brought me here. You brought your mother here.
I don't owe y'all anything. I don't owe.
yeah, so now the brother is going after Nancy and is upset. And, that's viable. I wouldn't do it here and now because Nancy's having a moment. But yeah, that makes sense, right? That you dragged us here. Now, it could be argued, Nancy could say, I didn't know he was going to say no. I thought he was going to say yes. I thought he might say no, but yeah, I'm sorry for dragging you here, but it's not my fault. He said no. So now maybe the brother could say, look, you dragged us here knowing that he might say no, or you dragged us here before you fully vetted the situation. Now, given the circumstance, I don't think it's really fair for the brother to come at her now. He could express that at a different time, given the circumstance. But it's another example, a tick in the column, if you will, of Nancy being invisibilized by her family. I don't know if that's a term other people use, but I've used it with clients before. Certain people and families will be invisibilized for various different reasons, and it's a massive trauma. It's not very obvious when you're being traumatized through invisibilization, if you will, because you're not being hit, for example, and you might have all your needs being met, meaning you have food and shelter and maybe even people saying I love you or whatever, but you're not being heard and you're being overridden, you're being bulldozed, you're being ignored. And you as a child will learn that, oh, I am invisible. I don't matter really. And so you might actually shut down a lot because what's the point, right? And then when you're interacting as an adult or as an older child, as a teen, you take yourself out of the equation and it won't be apparent that you're being invisibilized or the reason why you're shutting down was because you were previously invisibilized, right? You might even blame yourself. It's just like, well, I'm a quiet person or I don't like conflict, so I tend to shut down. That's on me. When, yeah, certainly you're playing a role, but it's originally because you had to shut down and you had to pull away and you had to invisibilize yourself. So those, and if you have that schema and that, so what that schema, what those experiences will teach us and will develop a schema of is, I don't matter, my feelings don't matter. That's what I'll hear from invisibilized people is my feelings do not matter to anyone. The first situation, the first circumstance where my feelings become inconvenient to someone else, they ignore my feelings or they throw my feelings away or I get thrown under the bus. And that's always as it's been, and that's always how it will be. And I'm very hurt and very angry about it. And so the problem, though, is, and so that's all rational and normal and healthy to have because that's human. But the problem is that schema will cause us to develop ways of coping with that schema, that assumption that everyone will always just discount our feelings and ignore us. And remember, in schema therapy, there are 3 different styles of dealing with the schema. One is surrender, avoid, then the second is avoidance, and the third is overcompensate. So if you surrender to that fact, if you will, in quotes, fact, that you're invisible and that you don't matter, you will engage in relationships with people that you know will invisibilize you. And so someone who's very narcissistic or something, which kind of is interesting here, right? I'm not calling him narcissistic, but he's definitely, he definitely takes up a lot of space and he definitely thinks highly of himself and he doesn't really ask her a lot of questions, right? So that's interesting. And so you might surrender, be like, I'm just inherently invisible and my feelings inherently just don't matter. There's really no sense in trying to cope with that. So I will engage in relationships where that will happen to me because that's just the way that it is. Might as well just give into it. When we're struggling with something difficult, a difficult schema like this, it sounds weird, but it is, sometimes it feels better to invite the problem into your life because if the problem's going to happen regardless, you might as well have some power in how you get harmed, right? I guess it'd be in a more rational situation. It'd be like if you have to I'm of the age where I have to get a colonoscopy. I've actually should have got it a long time ago, but the procedure just sounds absolutely horrific and terrifying to me. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure I'm building it up in my head. And actually watching Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, they have a YouTube video where they just filmed their entire, they didn't film while they were in the procedure, but before and after. And it seemed extremely demystified to me, and just watching them do it. And they're younger than me, so I'm like, oh, maybe it doesn't look so bad. Maybe I'll do it anyway. So something bad is going to happen to you, okay? You know it's not going to be pleasant. It's not something that people sign up for. But so for me to cope with that, I will say, well, I'll choose which physician I want to work with, or in what circumstance, or when I do it, right? I'll do it when I have the free time around that procedure or something. Anyway, the way that Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney made it look is they were just hanging out one day and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, I have a colonoscopy today. And I don't know, and maybe it's like that, but my point is that when you know something bad or discomforting or horrible or traumatic is going to happen to you, sometimes it feels better to invite it in on your terms, even though you're being harmed by it, but at least you had some control over the circumstance and the time and the place. That's not a permanent solution, of course, because of course the solution for people who have that issue is to learn through corrective experiences and through insight that you do matter and that your feelings are important, and to find people around you who are in line with that, right? That's the way to cope with it. But if schemas, we just believe them to be true. And I've talked with people who have gone through these traumas, and intellectually they'll be like, yeah, I know that my feelings matter, but they don't really believe that. They're like, yeah, it's like telling them that the sky is polka dotted or something. They're like, oh, okay, I've heard everyone say that, but they know the sky is not polka dotted. Anyway, the other way to deal with a schema is through avoidance. And so you could avoid relationships altogether, or avoid situations where you could be invisibilized. There's various different ways one might avoid. You could avoid your feelings also. You could engage in relationships, but avoid your feelings, avoid being vulnerable, so that you're never put in a position where you're being invisibilized because you're just avoiding being seen, I guess. And then the third way of dealing with it is to overcompensate. So you might engage in invisibilizing other people. You might deny other people their feelings, and and be narcissistic and sort of bulldoze your feelings on everyone else. Now, what that'll the effect that'll have is people will get so tired of that they will end up invisibilizing you, right? So all three of those dysfunctional ways of dealing with the schema will result in you being invisibilized. You surrender, you just give in, you find people that look like they're going to invisibilize you, you're being invisibilized. You avoid expressing yourself or avoid relationships, you're invisible. You overcompensate by bulldozing and making sure that you're never invisible and everyone will always know my feelings at all times. Well, people eventually get tired of that. They will invisibilize you. So all those and all of our problems relationally could be seen through this lens, and I often will see it through this lens. Schema therapy, it's pretty elegant in this way. Anyway, I wonder if any of this would resonate with Nancy. And Nancy, if you're watching, let me know. I'm curious, not just because I want to seem like I'm smart or something, but because I care. And a lot of people who have experienced invisibilizing trauma, there's not enough talk about it in our society and in our culture. And people like this don't get a lot of help. They're not likely to go to therapy, right? Because to go to therapy is to not be invisible. And if you believe you're inherently invisible, then why would you go to therapy? What's the point of being seen? Because you're not worth being seen, or no one cares. Certainly a therapist isn't going to care. They're just getting paid for their job, so who cares about it? And I want to point out that Nancy is being massively invisibilized by everything that's happening right now. The brother, the mom, Bartice, maybe even the show, the producers, I don't know.
Them anything. You are discriminating.
I want to hear something. Give me a smart.
Tell you what
you got to do.
No,
Why would you do all this to bring us here? Why would you do all this just to bring us here?
Yeah, so presumably everyone is there, aside from Bartice's mom, to take care of Nancy to show care or to help her. No one is listening to her. They're doing the direct opposite of what she's asking for. So I don't know what that says. Again, could just be a unique meltdown based on stress for the family, but it is interesting.
Just say, I don't.
I don't owe you any answers, bro. I owe her all the answers.
I'm bringing y'all here to waste our motherfucking time with my sister. My only
Go
sister.
inside, bro. Go inside.
We spoke about this in my
Go
house.
inside, bro. You don't understand.
Steve, stop.
You don't
I'm
understand.
trying to.
Now, Bartice could do a better job of apologizing because he legit committed a transgression on this family because it could be perceived that he lied or at least didn't tell the full truth or something. And he could say, yeah, brother, you're right. I should have told you, all I can tell you is that I was still on the fence, but I probably could have said more about why I was on the fence. And yeah, this is my fault and I'm sorry. And I don't know what to say. I just don't see us as compatible for the rest of our lives. I think I'm doing her a favor by saying no, because I think there's someone out there who's better for her than I am. So, but yeah, you're right, Nancy's brother. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did this to Nancy. I'm sorry I did it to you. I'm sorry I did it to everyone here. He could say that, but that's not what he's saying. He's like, you don't understand. And it's a pretty self-centered way of looking at it.
You
Never
understand.
will.
It's not for you to
Never will.
understand.
You never will, bro.
It's not
never
for
will.
you to understand.
I just want an explanation from this man. A small
You don't need one.
I will say, the way that he ties his tie, I have never seen a tie like that. And I don't know how I feel about it. On one hand, at first glance, it looks like a massive mistake. But then I look closer, it's like, no, that must be how he intended it to be. Is that a new trend or something? Point is that he is saying, I want to understand. And I get it. But, everyone, go away. Nancy doesn't want you there. Everyone, will you please go away? And, yeah, I can kind of relate to this in my family. We tend to just, I don't want to think my family would do this, but they would be in this direction. I think my family fairly verbal, and so there's a fair amount of like, well, let's just, because there's a lot of ancillary family members just kind of standing around, and I think that what that tells me is there's probably pros and cons to that, right? And there are pros and cons to my family, the way that my family is. But the pro is that you just show up and you're there and you're available and you care and you're standing by and you're paying attention and you're prioritizing family. The con is you never have your space. And Nancy's like, give me space.
I
do not need one. No, let me talk to you. I know I do not need one.
We will talk.
You're fucking this
I'm
whole thing up,
telling
bro.
you.
You're fucking
We will
all
talk.
I'm trying to give her a reason why.
Yeah, Bartice, just let Nancy deal with it. So Bartice says, you're effing it all up, bro. Bro, you're effing it up, bro. And then the brother's like, wait, what? I'm effing it up?
I told her no at the altar. You fucking it up right
I'm
now.
fucking this whole thing up.
I
But
need
yeah, you
y'all-
the one that want to bring us out here. Just say I don't, and I'm the one fucking this
That
up.
this is between me and Bartice, so I need you guys to back off. I need y'all to back off.
Yeah. So Nancy is, for the 100th time, probably literally, is saying, will you all please just go away? We'll talk later. I'm trying to have a conversation with Bartice. I was in the middle of talking and giving my perspective to Bartice, and y'all invisibilized me and interrupted this. Go away. So now, if you're an ancillary family member, you'd think you would start to amble away.
That's okay. We're not gonna force him to say yes.
Fucking go inside. Fuck this. You had to walk up there?
Let's go.
Okay, so they finally listened. No altercation. All right, so I don't know. I'm really curious as to what Nancy will say. Hopefully, she will get her chance.
Fuck that.
Boy, I told y'all from the beginning that little boy ain't got nothing to do with my sister.
And you
I
were
told
right.
y'all that.
It's fine. You were right.
I don't
It's
want to be
okay.
right. That's the thing.
For him to say no,
Yeah, now the brother and the mom are fighting again. I don't really understand the basis of their fight. I don't know why the mom has to argue. She could just be like, yeah, or just don't say anything. That's one of the best things you can do Now the mom's going through a moment too, but I think if the mom were just like, yeah, hear you, I'm with you, I agree, yeah, I got you, and then, but she's like automatically oppositional, or the tone is oppositional, and then he opposes her when she says you're right, then he opposes her. I don't want to be right. You know, is that what's going on in this family? It's like this style of communicating that is always oppositional. You're always opposing the other person. Oh, you know, I'll see people do that. This sort of automatic reaction against, and yeah.
I'm sorry, but you're stupid.
She got way too much going on for herself to be hooked up with a guy like this, with a little boy like this. Come on now, that ain't no man. That's a punk right there.
Yeah, though, as he talks like that and the way the mom talks, it has a vibe of oppression. You know, I don't know how they see it, of course, but when you are a member of an oppressed group, which I don't know if they are, but I could imagine that they might be, there are a lot of humiliations. There are a lot of injustices. There are a lot of moments where you feel ignored, put down, made to feel worthless, made to feel lesser than. And when you just have a lifetime of that, when something like this happens, a lot of that anger could come out. And you could just say things like, no one's going to disrespect me and my family. No one is going to make us feel lesser. No, I'm going to fight back and I'm going to show them. I'll make them lesser. You know, that kind of attitude. And I don't know if that's what we're seeing, but I wouldn't be surprised, you know? Like, there are families that just generations, hundreds of years of being made to feel lesser, being made to feel wrong. You know, like, one of the things in my family, my Japanese American side, is we as Japanese Americans were massively oppressed. Less so now, but in the past, to a great degree. I mean, my family was literally imprisoned during World War II just because they were Japanese Americans, born in the United States, citizens of the United States being locked up in prisons during World War II because their ancestors came from a country that we were at war with. They didn't do this to Germans or Italians, but they did it to Japanese people. Why? Because we're brown. That's why. And then, of course, after the war, there was massive discrimination because of hatred against Japanese people. Muslim Americans will be able to relate to this because after 9/11, it was, at least the narrative was, it was a Muslim attack. It was not a Muslim attack. It was an attack by an organization. Al-Qaeda had a philosophy of taking America down, or, you know, it's complicated. But a lot of white people just turned to Muslims that were living next door to them, or a mosque that was down the street, and decided to burn it down. It's like, what's wrong with you? Do you not understand? Like, that's just, that generalization is just so stupid. It would be akin to, because of Hitler during World War II, that Japanese Americans or Black Americans or Muslim Americans back in 1942 or 1943 decided to burn down a church, or decided to attack white people because, well, Hitler's white and you're white, so I'm attacking you. Okay, yeah, we all understand. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. It's based on a life. The reason why that didn't happen is because there's been a lifetime of white supremacy in our country and around the world, and so that whenever there's any excuse to attack Black or brown people, you know, people take that opportunity. And so that happened during World War II, before and after and during World War II. Anyway, so my family throughout, for many decades, because my family's been in this country and this state of Washington for over 120 years, and so they've been through a lot and coped with it. And when my grandfather, George Honda, you can actually Google him, he passed away a while back, but during his time, he was a star athlete. He was born in Yakima, Wapato area, which is central Washington, about 2 or 3 hours east of Seattle. Farmers, very poor. They lived, the whole family is like 7 or 8 of them just lived in a wallless shack, just, you know, meaning it was just one room and it was just planks, and there's a picture of it. Maybe I'll include a picture of it. But they farmed melons, from what I understand. Anyway, so very poor, very hard life. But my grandfather, George, was very good at sports. He was good at baseball. He was basically semi-pro at a certain point. And of course, they didn't let people of color in the major leagues back then, so he couldn't play there. But he almost became pro in Japan. This would have been like in the 30s. And he was really good at football, American football. He was really good at basketball and track. He was just good at everything. And to us in my family and my community, because George Honda, he was not only good at sports against other Japanese Americans, but he kicked the ass of white people. And that was a thing, right? To have one of ours like beating the white people, you know? So George, my grandfather, became not only a sports hero, but a cultural hero. And of course, there are analogous individuals within the Black American community, the Native American community, the Latinx community, where someone will rise up and play the game of the white people of mainstream America and beat them at that game. This is pointing at the ongoing feeling of oppression and being lesser and maybe even being invisibilized by society, ignored by society. And when you have that experience, there will be a number of different manifestations, including having a representative actually do well in the mainstream arena, and you celebrate that, but also just that ongoing feeling of just like of being put down and feeling lesser and feeling demoralized and upset, and that can get under your skin. We know that psychologically is that when we treat people poorly, they over time start to feel poorly about themselves. I'm just wondering if the family is having that reactivity, which would make total sense.
Hooked up with a guy like this, with a little boy like this. Come on now, that ain't no man. That's a punk right there.
All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.